They say trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can put the pieces back together, but you'll always see the cracks. My name's Marcus, and I learned this lesson the hard way when I discovered that my roommate and best friend of 4 years, Tyler, had been systematically ruining my life for his own entertainment. It started with small things that I'd been dismissing as bad luck. My car getting keyed in the apartment parking lot twice. My credit card being declined at restaurants when I knew I had money in my account. Job interviews that seemed to go great until suddenly the companies would ghost me completely. My girlfriend Emma breaking up with me out of nowhere, claiming I'd been sending mixed signals, and that she'd heard things about my character that made her uncomfortable. For months, I thought I was just going through a rough patch. You know how life can be sometimes. Everything hits you at once, and you start wondering if you're cursed or something. Tyler was actually the one consoling me through most of it, bringing me beers after another rejection email, listening to me vent about Emma, helping me file police reports about the car vandalism. The revelation came by complete accident. I was homesick with the flu last Tuesday, lying on the couch in a dayquil haze, when Tyler came home early from his job at the marketing firm. He didn't notice me crashed out behind the couch cushions when he walked in talking loudly on his phone. "Dude, you should see how paranoid Marcus is getting," he was saying, laughing like he'd just told the world's funniest joke. Yesterday he was convinced someone's been messing with his mail because another job rejection came back marked return to sender. Little does he know I've been intercepting his mail for months and sending back anything that looked important. My blood went cold. I stayed perfectly still, praying he wouldn't notice me. The best part is how grateful he is that I'm being such a supportive friend through his bad luck streak. Last week I convinced him to apply for this marketing position at Henderson and Associates, right? So I call them up the next day pretending to be his previous employer and tell them he was fired for harassment. Now he thinks he bombed the interview. I wanted to throw up, and it wasn't from the flu. Tyler kept talking, describing in detail how he'd been sabotaging my job applications, my relationships, even my credit score by signing me up for services I never requested and then letting them go into collections. The Emma thing was genius though. I just started casually mentioning to her friends that Marcus had been talking about other girls, asking weird questions about her schedule, stuff like that. Planted just enough seeds of doubt that when I finally told her I was worried about her safety, she bought it completely. He was destroying my life for fun. This person I trusted, who I'd helped through his own breakups and job struggles, who I'd lent money to when he was short on rent, he'd been systematically dismantling everything good in my life because he thought it was entertaining. The call ended, and I heard him walk into his room. I lay there for another hour, shaking with a rage I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just betrayal, this was sadistic, calculated cruelty from someone who was supposed to be my closest friend. That night, after Tyler left for his weekly poker game, I started digging. If he'd been sabotaging me for months, there had to be evidence. I started with the mail situation. Sure enough, I found a stack of my unopened letters hidden in the back of his closet. Job responses, credit card statements, even a letter from my grandmother that I'd been wondering about for weeks. The job sabotage was even worse than I'd thought. Tyler had been calling companies pretending to be references, landlords, even HR departments from my previous jobs. He'd created fake email accounts using variations of my name to send unprofessional messages to potential employers. He'd been systematically destroying my reputation in the professional community for months. But the Emma situation was what really made me see red. I found screenshots on his laptop. He'd been catfishing her using fake social media profiles, sending her anonymous tips about my supposed bad behavior, even creating fake dating profiles in my name with inappropriate photos and messages designed to make me look like a creep. The more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't random cruelty. Tyler had been jealous of me for years, resentful that things seemed to come easier to me than to him. When I'd gotten promoted at my previous job while he was stuck in an entry-level position, when Emma and I had started dating while he was going through a dry spell, when I'd gotten acceptance letters to graduate programs he'd been rejected from, he'd decided that instead of working on himself, he'd tear me down. I found journals where he'd written about his plans, treating my life like some kind of experiment. Marcus got that interview at Peterson Industries today. Time to make sure that doesn't work out. I'm thinking I'll call them tomorrow and tell them he lied about his college GPA. The entries went back almost 2 years. The worst part was reading his analysis of my reactions. He'd been studying how I responded to setbacks, fine-tuning his sabotage to cause maximum psychological damage. When I got depressed after losing job opportunities, he'd ramp up the relationship interference. When I started getting paranoid about the car vandalism, he'd switch tactics to financial sabotage. Tyler had turned destroying my life into a hobby, and he was getting better at it. Sitting there surrounded by evidence of his systematic betrayal, I realized something important. Tyler thought he was smarter than me. He thought I was just some unlucky guy who couldn't figure out why everything was going wrong. He had no idea that I'd discovered his game. That gave me an advantage he didn't know I had. The next morning, I had to make the hardest acting performance of my life. Tyler came out of his room around 10, yawning and complaining about losing money at poker, and I had to sit there eating cereal and pretend like nothing had changed. Rough night? I asked, forcing sympathy into my voice while internally screaming. Yeah, Kevin cleaned me out again. That guy's got the devil's own luck. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me. How are you feeling? You looked pretty rough yesterday. Better, thanks. Hey, I really appreciate you being so supportive through all this bad luck I've been having. I don't know what I'd do without a friend like you. The smile that spread across his face made my skin crawl. He was practically glowing with satisfaction at my gratitude. That's what friends are for, man. We've got to stick together. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to Tyler's patterns. He was most active with his sabotage when he thought I was making progress on something. If I mentioned a promising job lead, he'd find an excuse to leave the apartment and make his sabotage calls. If I talked about reaching out to Emma or trying to fix things with her, he'd suddenly need to run errands, and would come back an hour later looking pleased with himself. I also noticed that Tyler documented everything. He kept screenshots, recorded phone calls, even took photos of my reactions when his sabotage worked. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a project he was proud of. That gave me an idea. I started feeding Tyler information designed to expose his methods. I'd mention fictional job interviews and watch him scramble to sabotage opportunities that didn't exist. I'd talk about fake romantic prospects and observe him trying to interfere with relationships I wasn't actually pursuing. I've got this interview next week with Meridian Consulting, I told him one evening. It's for a senior analyst position, exactly what I've been looking for. His eyes lit up. That's great, man. When's the interview? Thursday at 2 p.m. I'm really nervous about it, but the recruiter seemed impressed with my resume. I'm sure you'll do great, he said, but I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. Sure enough, the next day I got a call from Meridian Consulting, canceling my interview due to concerns that had been brought to their attention. Except Meridian Consulting didn't exist, I'd made up the company name to test Tyler's response. When I acted devastated about the cancelled interview, Tyler was so sympathetic and supportive that I wanted to punch him. These companies don't know what they're missing, he told me. Their loss, man. But I was building evidence. Every fake opportunity one fed him, every fabricated setback I pretended to experience, was helping me understand exactly how his sabotage network operated. What I discovered over the next 2 weeks was that Tyler's sabotage operation was more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. He wasn't working alone, he'd recruited several mutual friends to help with his campaign against me, though most of them probably didn't realize the full scope of what they were participating in. Our friend Jason from college had been making some of the reference calories, thinking he was helping Tyler with pranks. Our neighbor Kelly had been the one actively keying my car, believing Tyler's story that I'd been harassing her sister. Even my cousin David had been involved, spreading rumors about me at family gatherings because Tyler had convinced him I'd been talking behind his back. Tyler had built an entire network of people who thought they were either playing harmless pranks or protecting others from my supposed bad behavior. He'd positioned himself as the concerned friend trying to manage my problems, while actually being the one creating them. The manipulation was masterful and disgusting. Tyler had studied each person's personality and crafted stories specifically designed to get them to participate. He told Jason it was all just college-style pranking between friends. He convinced Kelly I was a threat to women's safety. He made David believe I was spreading family drama. But Tyler's biggest mistake was his ego. He couldn't resist documenting his successes and sharing them with his girlfriend, Ashley. I found their text message exchanges where he'd brag about his latest schemes, complete with screenshots and photos of my reactions. Got Marcus again today, read one message. Convinced the Henderson people he was fired from his last job for drinking. You should have seen his face when he got the rejection email. Priceless. Ashley's responses were even more disturbing. Instead of being horrified by Tyler's behavior, she was encouraging it. LOL, that's amazing. What are you going to do next? They were treating my psychological torture like entertainment, a shared hobby that brought them closer together. Reading those messages, I realized that Tyler wasn't just jealous or vindictive, he was genuinely sadistic. He enjoyed causing pain, and he'd found someone who not only tolerated that side of him but actively encouraged it. That's when I decided Tyler needed to experience what it felt like to have someone systematically dismantle his life. I spent 3 weeks building my case before making my first move. Unlike Tyler's chaotic approach, I planned everything carefully. Tyler thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but he was about to learn that I'd been studying the game longer than he realized. My first target was Tyler's job. He worked at Brennan Marketing as an account coordinator, a position he was proud of and that gave him just enough authority to feel important. Tyler had been using company resources for his sabotage campaign, making calls from his work phone, using the office computer to create fake email accounts, even storing screenshots of his schemes on the company server. I'd been documenting everything, and I had months of evidence showing Tyler using company time and equipment for personal harassment campaigns. But instead of going directly to his boss, I decided to let Tyler expose himself. I created a fake consulting company called Premier Business Solutions, and sent an inquiry to Brennan Marketing requesting a proposal for a social media campaign. When Tyler was assigned to handle the initial consultation, I showed up to the meeting as the company representative. Tyler didn't recognize me at first. I'd grown a beard, wore glasses, and dressed completely differently than usual. During the meeting, I steered the conversation toward social media monitoring and reputation management, topics that got Tyler talking about his expertise in online manipulation. We've been looking for someone who really understands how to manage online narratives, I told him. Someone who knows how to influence perceptions. Tyler's eyes lit up. This was his chance to show off his skills. Well, I've had a lot of experience with reputation management, both professionally and personally. Sometimes you need to get creative with how you present information online. I kept pushing, and Tyler kept talking. Within an hour, he'd essentially confessed to running harassment campaigns, creating fake profiles, and manipulating online information, all while sitting in his employer's conference room, being recorded by their security cameras. The key is understanding psychology, he explained, completely caught up in showing off his expertise. People believe what they want to believe. You just have to give them a reason to believe what serves your purposes. When I asked for specific examples, Tyler actually showed me some of his work, including screenshots of the fake profiles he'd created to harass me, stored right there on his work computer. 2 days later, an anonymous tip was sent to Brennan Marketing's HR department, complete with video footage from their own security cameras showing Tyler discussing illegal harassment campaigns and admitting to using company resources for personal vendettas. Tyler was fired within 48 hours. Tyler's job loss was just the beginning. While he was scrambling to figure out what had happened at work, I was systematically dismantling the rest of his life using the same tactics he'd used against me. I'd learned from Tyler's journals that his biggest fear was being exposed as a fraud. Despite his confident exterior, Tyler was deeply insecure about his achievements and terrified that people would discover he wasn't as successful or talented as he pretended to be. So I started feeding that fear. I created anonymous social media accounts and began sharing interesting stories about Tyler with his extended network. Not lies. Tyler had taught me that the most effective sabotage uses truth twisted just enough to create doubt. I shared screenshots of Tyler's own words from his harassment campaigns, framing them as concerning behavior from someone I used to know. His college friends started asking questions. His family began reaching out with worried phone calls. His girlfriend Ashley suddenly found herself having to defend her boyfriend against accusations of being a manipulative sociopath. But the real masterpiece was what I did with Tyler's social media presence. Remember how Tyler had been documenting his sabotage campaigns with screenshots and photos? I'd been collecting that evidence for weeks, and now I started anonymously sharing it with the people he'd manipulated. Jason received screenshots showing how Tyler had been manipulating him into making fake reference calls. Kelly got evidence that Tyler had orchestrated the harassment campaign he'd claimed I was responsible for. David saw the messages where Tyler had bragged about destroying family relationships for fun. One by one, Tyler's network of unwitting accomplices realized they'd been played. The people who'd trusted him, who'd believed his stories about protecting them from me, discovered that Tyler had been lying to everyone. Jason confronted Tyler publicly, posting on social media about how he'd been manipulated into participating in harassment. Kelly filed a police report for fraud after realizing Tyler had convinced her to commit vandalism based on fabricated stories. David cut off all contact and started telling other family members about Tyler's manipulation tactics. Within 2 weeks, Tyler had lost his job, his girlfriend, Ashley dumped him when the full extent of his schemes became public, most of his friends, and his reputation in both professional and personal circles. But I still wasn't done. The final phase began when Tyler, desperate and increasingly paranoid, started suspecting that his life was being systematically destroyed. He was right, of course, but he had no idea how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. Tyler began acting erratically, convinced that someone was targeting him but unable to figure out who or how. He started changing his passwords daily, avoiding social media, even staying in hotels instead of coming home to our apartment. That's when I made my move. One evening, Tyler came home to find me sitting at our kitchen table with a thick folder in front of me. He looked terrible, unshaven, paranoid, clearly sleep-deprived. "Marcus, thank God you're here," he said, actually sounding relieved to see me. "I think someone's been messing with my life. My job, my relationships, everything's falling apart and I can't figure out why." I looked up at him with what I hoped was a sympathetic expression. "That sounds awful, Tyler. Have you considered that maybe it's just bad luck?" Something in my tone must have registered because his face changed. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "What's in the folder, Marcus?" I opened it slowly, revealing the top document, a printed copy of Tyler's journal entry describing his plans to sabotage my interview with Peterson Industries. "It's a comprehensive record of everything you've done to me over the past 2 years, I said calmly. "Every job you sabotaged, every relationship you destroyed, every lie you told about me. All of it documented, verified, and organized chronologically." Tyler's face went white. "Marcus, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you spent 2 years systematically destroying my life for entertainment? Can you explain why you recruited our friends to help you harass me? Can you explain why you documented your cruelty like it was a hobby you were proud of?" He started to speak, but I held up a hand. "Actually, don't bother explaining. I already know why you did it. You were jealous, insecure, and instead of working on yourself, you decided to tear me down. What you didn't realize is that I've been watching you work, learning your methods, and building a case against you." I flipped through the folder, showing him screenshots of his own messages, copies of his journal entries, records of phone calls he'd made to sabotage my opportunities. "The beautiful thing about your personality, Tyler, is that you can't help but document your successes. You were so proud of destroying my life that you kept detailed records of everything you did. Records that I've now shared with everyone whose life you've manipulated. Tyler slumped into a chair across from me, finally understanding the scope of what had happened to him. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "I overheard your phone conversation 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been doing to you exactly what you did to me, systematically dismantling your life using your own tactics. So everything that's happened, my job, Ashley, my friends. All consequences of your own actions, Tyler. I didn't have to lie about you or make up stories. I just had to make sure the right people saw evidence of who you really are." Tyler sat there in silence for several minutes, and I could see him processing the full extent of his situation. He'd lost everything: his job, his girlfriend, his friends, his reputation, and it had all been accomplished using his own documented confessions. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "Now you move out," I said. "You find somewhere else to live, you leave me alone, and you try to rebuild your life without destroying other people's in the process. And if I don't?" I smiled, and for the first time in our friendship, Tyler actually looked afraid of me. "Then I start sharing this folder with your family, your former employers, and the police. Because what you did to me wasn't just cruel, Tyler, a lot of it was actually illegal. Fraud, harassment, identity theft, interfering with business relationships. I've been documenting everything, and I have enough evidence to make your life very complicated if you decide not to cooperate." Tyler moved out the next day. He found a job in another city and, as far as I know, started over somewhere else. I never heard from him again, which was exactly what I wanted. Looking back, I realized that Tyler taught me something valuable about human nature. He showed me that some people will destroy others not out of necessity or desperation, but simply because they can. He thought he could manipulate and control everyone around him, but he made one critical error: he underestimated his victim. I put Tyler in a situation where he couldn't avoid the consequences of his own choices. He'd spent 2 years building evidence of his cruelty, and I simply made sure that evidence found its way to the people who needed to see it. In the end, Tyler wasn't destroyed by my revenge, he was destroyed by his own documented confessions and the natural consequences of his actions. The best part? Tyler still probably doesn't understand what really happened to him. He knows his life fell apart, but I doubt he's capable of accepting that it happened because he spent years being a genuinely terrible person. He'll probably always believe he was the victim of some elaborate conspiracy, never realizing that his downfall was entirely self-inflicted. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is simply letting someone experience the consequences of their own behavior.